A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, the Northern Territory government's announced a new round of consultation on the possible introduction of euthanasia laws. Nicholas Lay is the NT Director for the Australian Christian Lobby. Nicholas, a special welcome back to 2020.
Good morning, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Nicholas, not the first time the Northern Territory government has had some level of consultation. They did this a couple of years back, 2023. But you say that consultation done then was a sham. Give us a little background on what you're feeling about what happened then and what's coming.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, in 2023, distinctly remember it, I attended the consultation in Alice Springs. And the kind of messaging put out was that they were going to the community to see if they would want these laws. But unfortunately, in the terms of reference, it didn't specifically ask that question. It was more, we're going to implement assisted suicide laws here in the Northern Territory. What do you think that'll look like? What do you want that to look like? And so unfortunately, for us that oppose these laws, we weren't able to convey that properly. Obviously, the panel was very respectful and, listened to our concerns, but they weren't given the ability to consider that threshold question. And so that was unfortunate. I know many people reached out to me at the time, disappointed in that process. Even the online survey was very geared towards that. So, if you were going on to do the survey and you opposed assisted suicide laws altogether, it was actually very difficult for you to complete that survey because it always asked, what would you prefer, this or that? And so, a lot of people were disappointed in that. Obviously we don't support any laws. We oppose them completely. But with the reconsultation process, I think there was an acknowledgement that they might have got that wrong. And obviously it was a different government, so they might want to do it again. But we look forward to making submissions and having that consultation again.
So you say the terms of reference in the 2023 consultation were faulty. Was that, do you think, by accident or by design with the Northern Territory government in that day?
I think by design. I think they went out with that agenda. Their plan was that once that consultation came back, they would table legislation. This being the Labor government of the day, that was their purpose, and they specifically said that leading into the election. So there's no doubt they were going to be given a conscience vote, the individual members of Parliament, but that was their intention. So their intention was that these laws would come through, or at least get to Parliament floor. But the consultation was just about shaping that law, whereas this one starts with a very different premise. And from the media release from the Attorney General, the terms of reference say that it's specifically to gather views on possible introduction, and it specifically says if the committee recommends adoption, provide drafting instructions. And so it's just starting from a different place. It's starting from, actually consulting with the community what they want, which is a good start.
Really disturbing, isn't it? When you think that community consultation is open to all comers, and you've got an expert advisory panel, they were, it's back in 2023, ready to hear from the community, but community voices that were opposing the assisted suicide were explicitly excluded from the consideration. You say you were there then. That must have been quite a surprise, being on the floor and trying to pose a question, but being rejected because you're excluded.
Yeah, it was interesting. So my example was I attended the Alice Springs one, and there was about 40 people in attendance there, and I would safely estimate that 20 of the people opposed the laws altogether. After a few people got up, the panel co-chair got up, and I've quoted it because I wanted to get this accurate. He said, "The terms of reference for this panel were set by the government, but if you look at the terms of reference, they do not call upon this panel explicitly to consider the threshold question of whether or not the Northern Territory government should introduce legislation of this kind." And so that was said specifically in response to opposition in the community consultation meetings.
Okay, there's change with the new consultation, but just for a few moments here, because we're talking the Northern Territory, and those opposed to euthanasia, this voluntary assisted dying, well, clearly the Aboriginal community in the Northern Territory is very large, and in some sense here, and I'll get your thoughts, they were excluded from the consultation back then. Is that the case?
So the panel did visit a couple of communities. I don't think they did a good enough job in getting out there because, you know, even in my conversations when I've been out in remote communities, you know, people aren't aware that this legislation is potentially at our doorstep. And from my experience, and this is an experience shared by many, it was shared on the floor of Parliament last week by many of the members, there is significant opposition out bush in our remote communities. And some of it stems obviously from our Christian perspective, but there is also a cultural perspective out bush. It's simply something that isn't... It's rejected out bush fairly broadly. And this was demonstrated in this conversation in the 90s as well, when, for those that aren't aware, NT was actually the first jurisdiction in the world to bring in laws like this, and they were overturned by the federal government. And in that process, there's a fella who was in charge of, I guess, doing education out bush, and he went out to 21 communities to, I guess, provide details and get feedback about the legislation. And his feedback was that overwhelmingly there was opposition to any such legislation. And I think it actually did a lot of harm too when it did come to the Territory. You know, you had people that... You know, it doesn't matter how much education you do, there is going to be, you know, an inherent fear to access health services. Now, that's not, making conclusions. That's documented that, particularly in the Northern Territory, there was quite a reaction to this. There was quite a fear to this. And, and that was demonstrated through the process. And I think that really needs to be considered this time round with the consultation as opposed to 2023, because I just don't think that was highlighted enough. And it is going to, potentially affect health outcomes for people living out bush in our remote Aboriginal communities. We don't need another barrier for Aboriginal people accessing our health services here in the Northern Territory.
Okay, we might come back and talk some more about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sentiments around euthanasia in a few moments, but just stay with this for a few moments. The 2023 Expert Advisor Panel, if it was a sham, as you say, then it was really just a front, wasn't it, for legalising assisted suicide, regardless of what the public sentiment was at all. So when you have public consultation, you expect that at least everyone who's for or against is going to be able to make some sort of a contribution to the way things will be discussed. But we did mention there has been a change of government since then. What's better about what's planned now for a new public consultation?
Well, as I mentioned the terms a bit earlier, they are open to hearing different views on this, and also that they're looking to consult extensively with communities across the Northern Territory. Now, that's just their initial terms of reference release. Taking that at face value, that sounds good. But I guess the proof will be in the pudding whether or not this new government will consult extensively in the communities, and particularly with those of opposing views, and really hearing that and taking that into consideration of whether or not this is a wise thing for the Northern Territory.
What's your personal feeling here? The new government in the Northern Territory, are they likely to be much more consultative? Given the sham of 2023, are you feeling good about it?
It's hard to say because they are relatively new to government. We haven't seen. We saw, a couple of inquiries on a small scale, but we haven't seen anything to this scale yet take place. So, hopefully they do deliver on this. Hopefully, and because they've been specific about this, hopefully that is a good indication. But like I said, the proof will be in the pudding. Whether or not they do it or not is yet to be seen.
Well, Nicholas, you're in the Northern Territory and you've got wide exposure to all sorts of different people groups. Just let me tap your understanding for a few moments around Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander attitudes to end-of-life issues here, of what will be debated in the Northern Territory. Give us your insight here, because are Aboriginal communities suspicious of government intervention, and especially around actually ending someone's life early? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, there's definitely a clear sentiment of it's against their culture. That's not how they do things. That they look after their old people until they go naturally, and there's quite a process in that as well. It's part of the mourning process, of course, but it is interesting how it seems to be distinct from the Christian influence in the communities as well, because obviously with our faith, we value life. And we oppose these things because of that, because of God, and He's the creator of life. But culturally, there seems to be an additional element as well, that it's just simply something that is, when I've brought this up to people in community, they almost have shock on their face, is the way I would characterize it. It's that it's so absurd to even consider. And I think, I hope that those views will be expressed well in this consultation process, and that will be heard.
Interesting, isn't it? Because as Christians, we'd say this is against our culture too, because as you indicate, the value of human life, this is so powerful, being created in the image and likeness of God. We say that life is valuable. It's not just for being expendable at somebody else's whim. But stay with us, though, on the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander views, though, because a little bit of thought that I picked up in preparing for our conversation today, but which goes along the lines of, because Indigenous people may have many mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers, talking a tribal situation here, many more brothers and sisters, and because life expectancy averages are lower within First Nations communities, periods of grief and remembrance, they last a lot longer. So it really is an affront to Aboriginal culture to have things like this, euthanasia.
Yeah, and there can be quite a payback culture experienced in the communities, and when there is harm done, there can be a culture of payback. And unfortunately, in regards to this, there can be suspicion around it. I know, our palliative care in the Northern Territory suffered a lot of, damage, reputational damage, when these laws came in the 90s. And they've since done a good job of trying to restore that relationship with the communities, that they're not so fearful to go into places like palliative care. And any such laws brought in is is likely going to damage that relationship again, and people are unfortunately not going to seek health services, unfortunately.
There's a thought, isn't there, from people who are in government and going against all the ethics that we might hold to as Christians, and maybe against all the ethics that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people would hold to. They just think of, just change things and everybody adjusts. But it's not quite so easy to do that, is it? Especially, too, when we're in a Christian community and we have revelation from God about the value of life. Christians just can't afford to just roll over and adjust here. There's something worth fighting for, isn't there? Recognising the value of human life.
That's right, and it's something we're going to have to stand up for across the nation, in the territory as well. But we see this constant attack on life, and even all states have this law now. The ACT's law will come into effect the end of the year, but we're already seeing this expansion of access, particularly in Victoria. There's talks about it already, removing conscientious objecting, and so it's really on us as Christians to continue to protect life, to value life, because it is under attack, unfortunately.
And as Christian believers, if we don't stand up for life, who else will? It's not just in this issue, is it, of talking about euthanasia, but, last week we saw the New South Wales abortion bill. Similar sorts of things, conscientious objection rejected, and therefore forcing people to do things against their conscience. Hey, Nicholas,
right.
We've run out of time here. When people go to the ACL website, are there any particular campaigns around this? Are you doing anything in the Northern Territory for listeners throughout the Territory? Is there something that people can glean at the acl.org.au website? Anything particular special coming up?
Yeah, obviously the website is a great place to go to, and being subscribed to our newsletter so we can get that information out to people quickly. I think generally on these issues in the NT, we will be making sure that Christians are aware and to go to those consultations to have their voice heard. More broadly, I think contacting your local member if this is an issue, particularly in the NT in Victoria in terms of assisted suicide, reaching out to your local member, telling them you oppose this, and that really does add up, because unfortunately with even in Parliament, I'm hearing now with conscientious objecting, it seems like they're using it less for a mechanism of their conscience, but rather to represent the electorate. So they're given a conscience vote, but they tend to vote with their electorate. So unfortunately, that's the way that's shifted. So, and people and members of Parliament need to be hearing those opposing views in their electorate, so they can feel emboldened to vote the right way.
Well, a practical opportunity for listeners in the Northern Territory to be salt and light. A new consultation process coming. You can connect with Nicholas Lay. Nicholas is the Northern Territory Director for the Australian Christian Lobby. You can connect with him via the website, acl.org.au, as he says. Get subscribed and be able to link with all of the latest updates. Nicholas, thanks so much for taking some time to share your insights with listeners.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.